Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is 4 p.m. ET on Thursday, and that means you have found us on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 going on 15 novels of suspense. My current book is The House Guest, which is cleverly on the door behind me, and my new book, just coming out in February, which is soon, is One Wrong Word. You can see you can make a book face out of one wrong word. I love that. About rumors and gossip and greed and revenge. So I hope you will look for that. But today we are not talking about one wrong word. We are talking about the many right words in The Spy Coast by the fabulous, iconic, marvelous Tess Gerritsen, her brand new book, which is out to international acclaim. It's absolutely riveting and wonderful and original. You will absolutely love The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen. Tess has been touring the United States and is about to head off to the UK. Tell us a little bit about that. What's your UK tour like?
Oh, the UK tour is so much fun because I get a driver and they always put me up a day ahead of time in London because they know about jet lag. So I get one day to just decompress and go out to dinner by myself and hang out with a book at a restaurant. And that is my favorite thing to do.
Because you might be unrecognizable in London in a restaurant by yourself with a book. So your fans, that you couldn't do that in the United States. You'd be inundated with fans. So you get to be by yourself.
Oh, I think like a lot of writers, I enjoy being by myself. It never bothers me to shut myself into an office all day. I know that sounds weird to normal people, I suppose, but we're not normal, are we?
No, and we embrace that. We embrace that. I mean, you couldn't write a book. You couldn't write as many books as you've written without being by yourself and embracing that. I mean, loving that, the time that you have to be by yourself with your imaginary friends, of course.
Right, right. And our imaginary friends are always very interesting, way more interesting than we are.
Maybe so. Although they come from us, right? So they come from you. So that means you are indeed a fascinating person. Well, we can't wait to hear about what's going to happen in the UK. That must be so much fun, and to be driven around. I mean,
Yes.
you were saying you've had the same driver. Kathy says, I've been waiting for 4 p.m. all day for Crime Time. Kathy, that's so nice. The same driver for many years?
For probably 20 years, every time I go back, and I need to be moved from one venue to another. And England is it's actually drivable. I'm assigned to my lovely Bradley Rose. I've actually used his name in a couple of books. I think once I made him into a serial killer. He was very happy about that. But that's one of the joys of being in touring in England. They take very good care of you.
I mean, I do think Bradley Rose, the character of a Bradley Rose type person, would be a good character for a book. Someone who drives famous people around and hears all of their secrets and has them in his car. You could do a lot of things with that.
That's right. And Bradley knows all my secrets.
That's great.
Hey, Bradley, if you're watching.
Hey, don't tell. Welcome, 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 Tess Gerritsen. Today we will be talking about The Spy Coast with Tess Gerritsen. So much love and affection already in the comments for you, and we will get to all of those in just a moment. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze and Crime Time, welcome, welcome, welcome. A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic, going on 4 years ago, astonishingly, by the powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us learning about new books and learning about new authors and talking, like today, to some of our favorite authors and hearing about their new book. So we are so honored that you are here with us today. Tess Gerritsen is going to be giving away a copy of The Spy Coast, not this one. I'm keeping this for myself, but at the end of the show, that one, the end of the show, we'll be spinning the wheel of fun to give a copy of The Spy Coast to one lucky commenter. So leave a question, leave a comment, leave applause, leave general affection and adulation for Tess in the comments, and you will be entered to win. Now I'm going to keep talking for about 10 more seconds while I tell you the formal bio of Tess Gerritsen, because in case, in some wild possibility that you don't know who she is, I can't even imagine that. Let me tell you about that. Internationally best-selling author Tess Gerritsen is a graduate of Stanford University, and Tess went on to medical school where she was awarded her MD. Now listen to this. While on maternity leave from her work as a physician, she began to write fiction. And in 1987, her first novel, Call After Midnight, was published. It was the first of 32 suspense novels that she's written over a 36-year writing career. Is it more than 32 now? Do you know?
I have to think about it. after a certain point, you just keep on writing. You don't think, I think it's about 32. Yes.
That's great. That is quite amazing. Her books have been translated into 40 languages, and more than 40 million copies have been sold around the world. And they're selling right now, this very minute, even as we speak. And we'll put up a link so you can be the next one to buy The Spy Coast. Her series of novels featuring homicide detective Jane Rizzoli and medical examiner Maura Isles inspired the hit TNT television show Rizzoli and Isles, which we all love, starring Angie Harmon and Sasha Alexander. This book, The Spy Coast, has just been optioned by Amazon TV as a series. So that is quite marvelous. And she lives in Maine, where apparently it is about to snow like mad. Good luck. Or you must be used to that, living in Maine.
Yeah, we're used to it. It's really late this year. We should have had snow for Christmas, but we didn't.
Well, we shall see. We shall see what happens. I think it's supposed to pour here in Boston. So whatever, we'll see. So anyway, let's talk about The Spy Coast, which takes place in the snow, as you can see. Tell us what the book is about, Tess, and set up the story for us, if you will.
Well, I will set it up by telling you where it came from first, the idea for it. So I moved to Maine about 3 decades ago, and my husband is a medical doctor. He opened up a new medical practice. And when he would bring in new patients, he would always, ask them what they did for a living. The occupational history affects your health.
Mm.
And he started to hear the same answer a couple of times that didn't make any sense. The people would say, I used to work for the government. He'd say, what did you do for the government? And they'd say, I can't talk about it. So after about 3 times, he was really wondering who these people are who couldn't talk about their occupations. And a real estate agent told us, oh, they are all retired CIA. We have a lot of retired spies living up here. And in fact, I found out later that on my little street, I had 2 neighbors who were retired spies. So over the decades, I watched them. I kind of know who they are. And I wondered, what is retirement like for spies?
Mm.
You've had an interesting job. Maybe you've lived abroad. Maybe you've even carried a gun. Who knows? But now you're living in this quiet little town where nothing much happens. So that became the start of The Spy Coast. I have a retired spy. Her name is Maggie Bird. You wouldn't know she's a spy because she's a chicken farmer. And she's very happy raising her chickens, keeps to herself, doesn't talk to anybody. But then one day a dead body shows up on her driveway, and it's a call back to her old career. She has to really go back to work and figure out what's going on. It's something that happened. It was her last operation as a CIA operative, and it still haunts her to this day, decades later. And now she has to go back and take care of things.
And she's not the only spy who lives in this town.
No, she has moved to this town because 4 of her friends were already living in the town. So we have this group of 5 retired spies who know each other. They've known each other for decades. They're old friends. This is a group that they can talk to each other. They can't tell everything, but they know what they did. So it's kind of a fun group, and they have a book group once a month. Like a lot of us have book groups, but what they really do is get together and drink. They drink, they have dinner, and they gossip.
Called the Martini Club, right?
Right. So she calls on her friends for help when it's clear that somebody wants to kill her.
I mean, it's interesting because finding a dead body in your driveway can be nothing but a message. It's not going to be random, especially if you're an ex-spy. And I wonder, what went through your mind about whether someone can ever be an ex-spy? I mean, you sort of always were one, and what you did lives on.
Well, it's a little bit like being an ex-doctor. You never really are. You have that knowledge base. I mean, maybe it's out of date, but it causes you to think in a certain way. I think doctors think in a certain way, and I imagine spies do too. It may be hard for them to, trust something just based on what people tell them. I'm sure they're very big believers in trust but verify. So I think that they are basically suspicious people. They're not quick to trust you, and they are probably pretty curious types as well. So that's what they bring into their retirements, is that their brains are still there, they're still capable, and they still have a gaze that wants to look around the corner.
And it's interesting too, because when you're a retired spy, you know things. It's just that nobody's asking you about them anymore. And that's one of the things that sort of torments Maggie Bird, who we love, is that she has value and yet she's become sort of invisible in the world.
Well, that's the other theme in this story, and I think I had to become this age to write this story. It's about what happens to retirees of whatever background. I mean, rocket scientists as well. Once you become 65, you're no longer working actively. People forget you, and yet you may not have forgotten those skills. So it's a book about retirees and how they should still be paid attention to. They have a lot of wisdom, and they have a lot to impart, and we should not be ignoring them.
I mean, I think that any woman, and I think I can say this, knows what it feels like to be invisible, where we try to say something and no one listens. We go somewhere and no one notices us. I mean, this can be a detriment or it can be a real skill to be invisible. Talk about how Maggie uses both things.
Well, Maggie finds it an advantage. Your average spy doesn't want to be noticed. They don't want to be handsome James Bond or some beautiful woman in a low-cut gown that walks into the casino. I mean, we've all seen that in the movies, right? All the spies are gorgeous.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that. And Maggie finds that with age comes anonymity, and becomes the best disguise of all. Because let's face it, when people walk into a room, they're looking at the gorgeous people. They're looking at the young chick with the perfect skin. They may not even notice the 65-year-old gray-haired woman in the corner taking notes and paying attention. so that's where Maggie has an advantage over everybody else.
I mean, what was it? I mean, that must have been so much fun and almost revengeful to make her be such a powerful person when she's invisible, to use that skill.
It is. I mean, it was really fun because there's a foil in this book, and the foil is a young female police chief who is she's the police chief of the local town, who is she's maybe in her 30s, and she overlooks the Martini Club. She thinks they're just a bunch of retirees. They have a book club, and maybe they drink a lot, but what can they possibly tell me? And she learns, to her regret, that she should have been paying attention to what these 5 people know.
And yet Jo Thibodeau, this woman that you're talking about, we love her. We watch her grow and we watch her come into her power. Sort of that sort of character arc for her. What was that like to write as well? Tell us a little bit about Jo.
Oh, I love Jo too, because Jo reminds me of a lot of people I know in Maine. She's a native born Mainer. Her roots are really deep. She loves her town. She's a solid person. But she's young. so maybe she has a little bit of she's ageist in that she's not sure the 60-year-old chicken farmer is really anybody that she needs to pay much attention to. And the fun part is how she does become more aware, little by little, that this woman is not who I thought she was. I mean, when Jo shows up to investigate this dead body and notices there's like a little camera over the doorway, she thinks, well, she probably has a Ring camera. Can I go look at your surveillance video? And Maggie doesn't want to show her, but when she does, Jo is flabbergasted when she finds out it is a state-of-the-art multi-camera surveillance system all around the farm. And she begins to think, who is this woman? She's not the granny I thought she was.
And when the dead body is found in her driveway, she's not the doddering, fluttery old woman who's freaking out over this. She's asking questions about evidence, and she doesn't seem to be reacting the way a regular person would react. I mean, talk a little bit about, as an author, writing that, being Maggie, being Jo, having that situation, understanding the themes of invisibility and the conflict between the 2 women of 2 different ages and equally wise, but in a different way. Was that fun to write?
Oh, I don't know about you, but when I write, it really matters if I can hear their voice in my head. I can hear them talk. And very often books will start for me with a character talking. And that was how this book started. It was Maggie's voice saying, I'm not the woman I used to be. It was a very sad, very haunting kind of a statement. And I thought, well, who did you used to be? So when I write a scene from a new point of view, it's really all about what are they saying to me and what do their voices sound like and what vocabulary are they using? I mean, I know that Maggie, having been well educated and having lived abroad, is going to have a pretty international view of things. She's going to know about all these foods. She's going to know what things taste like. She's going to know what whiskeys to drink. And Jo, she's a local girl. You know, she grew up with her dog and hiking in the woods with her dad, who's a biology teacher. So it's those different voices talking to each other on the page, and they all come from within our own heads, don't they?
Well, I think that's so fascinating. I know that you know that Sue Grafton used to call that the magic, when there's some voice in your head. I mean, the moment that you heard Maggie Bird in your mind saying, I'm not the woman I used to be, a writer like you embraces that, says, thank you, tell me more,
Right.
not, oh my goodness, I'm hearing voices.
I know. I never tell the voices to go away. And you know, that's the other thing that we welcome as writers is nightmares. I mean, I've had a whole book based on a nightmare. So when I wake up and I've had a terrible dream, it's not like I say, oh my God, that was horrible. It's like, there's a book in this. How do I turn it into a book?
Oh, I love that, embracing the terror. That is
Yes.
wonderful. You mentioned that she's a chicken farmer, and there is a lot of fun stuff about chickens in this book. How do you know so much about chickens?
Oh, my son had a flock of about 75. And I learned a lot about them when he went away for 2-week vacation. And I was in charge of the chickens. So I had 2 weeks of feeding them, watering them, collecting their eggs, you know, putting the eggs into cartons. And this was in the dead of winter when it was about, you know, minus 10 degrees here in Maine and covered in snow. So I like chickens. I think they're really charming animals. I'm not crazy about roosters, which you
Yeah.
may find out from the book, you know, because I have some little comment about cocks.
Yes.
But I find hens just very sweet and a lot smarter than we think.
I'm just trying to picture you in like boots and coat, parka, in
That's
10 degrees below zero, going out and collecting eggs. Were you just laughing and laughing?
You know, it was collecting the eggs is like a treasure hunt. That's the best part of taking care of chickens because you get to pick. And he had different breeds of chickens so that there were white eggs, brown eggs, and blue eggs. And you would get this beautiful Easter egg color combination of eggs in your basket. So that was a lot of fun.
And kind of different every day, sort of a
Different
gorgeous
every
gift
day.
every day. Let's talk about, and we're talking about the Spy Coast. If you, Shannon Hansen says, I want chickens. Mindy Ehrlich says, so nice to read books with a woman closer to my age. Yes, indeed. And Brenda Gaskell says, I'm going to start looking at nightmares a new way now. That's very nice. There's so much in this book about travel and beautiful international cities. Is that all? And it sounds like it's from such love of those places and such knowledge. Talk a little bit about the places in the book and why you love them.
Well, the book takes place in the past. We look at Maggie's past career as a spy and how she fell in love with the man she married. And it takes her to Bangkok, to Istanbul, to London, to Malta. And a lot of the activity takes place abroad in the past. And all those places I've been to, it was my first chance to really write about some places I truly love. I love Bangkok, and the other thing that I write into it is that the background of myself as a daughter of a chef. My father was a professional cook, so there's a lot of food in the story. And when Maggie eats spicy beef noodle soup sitting in the little market in Bangkok, it's because I love that soup. And the same thing in Istanbul. So yeah, it was bringing back memories of my many trips there. I like to call myself a lifelong tourist because it feels like everywhere I go, there's always something new to see and taste.
I mean, I love how the Martini Club bonds over food as well. And the sort of food that they create and cook comes from their own histories. It's all so gorgeously connected. Talk a little bit about the food, as you were saying about your father and about the beef soup. That's one of my favorite scenes in the book, the beef soup scene. Is why is food such a connector, and why does food have so much power in history?
Well, with this group of people, they've all lived abroad. And it's my experience that people who have lived abroad have a very open palate. They're willing to try new things. You don't go, hopefully you don't go to Istanbul and just eat hamburgers every day. You really want to go and try everything else. So that's why the Martini Club, when they get together for their book group, it's a potluck, and they each bring dishes from the part of the world that they served in, because that's what they're familiar with. So getting back to food as a unifying factor. I have this wonderful story about my grandmother, on my father's side. She was Cantonese. She did not speak any English. And her next door neighbor, when she was a young married person, was a young Mexican housewife. And she did not speak any Chinese, obviously. So here we were, two neighbors, the Chinese lady and the Mexican lady, living side by side. They couldn't communicate with each other, but they taught each other recipes. And I still have my Chinese grandmother's recipe for tamales.
Oh, that's great.
She made tamales every New Year's because her neighbor did. And that to me is a way of showing that there are only two ways, I think, that are universally communicative. One is food and the other is music.
Yes. And you so gorgeously weave those together in so many of your books. I know you can't answer this. I was thinking about this question, and I thought, well, if she's never going to tell me. How did you know so much about being a spy? You weren't a spy, right?
No. And to be frank, I would be a terrible spy. I wouldn't be able to keep the truth from somebody. I learned what I could based on, first of all, I start with memoirs. I read a lot of CIA memoirs of people who have retired from the agency, what it was like for them, in the field. And I think you learn a lot, hopefully truthful details about what it is like to really to try and cultivate an asset. It's not James Bond. I mean, we always think of spies as James Bond, but for the most part, it's making friends. It's trying to get information. It's not very interesting. Maybe it's not very exciting, but they are motivated. And this is one thing I did learn from the few spies I have talked to, or their children. They are motivated by patriotism. Yes. I mean, they go into it with the highest motives. And maybe they become cynical, and then maybe they lose that patriotism over time because they're frustrated. But these are people who are willing, to risk quite a bit to serve their country. As far as the tradecraft, there is a lot written about tradecraft, and I don't think it's really hard to find the details of how you contact your asset. For instance, there's a little detail about using Starbucks gift cards, and I thought everybody knew that after reading that book, and it turns out that this was something that most people didn't know. That's
can you tell? It's not really giving anything away. I thought, ooh, could that work? Talk a little bit about that. Tell us about it.
So here you have an asset who is in a dangerous position. You don't really want to be seen calling them or contacting them, but your asset wants to make contact with you because they have some information they want to pass on. Well, in the past, you've even given them a Starbucks gift card, and every time they want to contact you, they buy something at Starbucks. And the CIA operative is watching that account for Starbucks and sees, oh, he bought something. That means they need to contact me. And so that was one way of communicating.
I just love that. I think that's so great. The thing about, though, being a spy is that you live your life for a purpose, as you were talking about, generally patriotism, for a purpose, and you're being someone else. You're just never who you really are. Do you think people lose who they really are? How do they figure out who they are compared to who they're supposed to be?
That was one of the things that really drew me to this whole idea of espionage, is the psychological and emotional burden of not being able to be who you are, not telling the truth. Whenever you make a friend or someone makes a friend with you, there's a question of a secondary motive. That's got to be hard. It's got to be wearing on a person, and especially if your spouse is not in the agency as well. So I think it must be a hard life, and I think I've heard that they have a really high divorce rate, and I'm not surprised.
I mean, it would be hard to decide who to trust. I mean, I think that a spy, certainly has a high-tuned sense of a problem or danger or fear or duplicity, and they may see it where it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, as I said, they're the kind of people that want to look around corners, and maybe they imagine that around the corner is a big monster, but really it's just their husband with dinner. So I I suspect that it's true that they probably do have high divorce rates, and they probably do need to see psychiatrists more often, and they may need to have counseling as they get older. But the people that they can talk to are probably their own colleagues, and that's why I imagine it's probably a pretty tight bond after retirement.
And because there's such a theme of friendship in this novel, of
Yeah.
growing friendship, whether it's the Martini Club or whether it's Joe and Maggie. Do you think friendship is a bond that is important to all of us?
It it is probably the one reason I watch Star Trek so many years. I'd like to think that, when we watch television series, what are we really watching for? Yeah, it's not necessarily for that character. It's for the universe of characters. We
Mhm.
love the camaraderie. We loved Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy, and how they would risk their lives for each other. All these shows that are so popular, that continue to go on for many years. I think it's really, we want to share that circle of friendship. So even though we may not have our own circle, I think we all long for it. That sense that there are people out there who will stand by me no matter what.
And we are talking about The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen. And it is absolutely irresistible. And you've gotten some from what we've talked about this afternoon, why this, Susie says MASH is a good example of bonding.
Right.
Absolutely, totally. So Mary Tyler Moore as well. Talking about The Spy Coast, which is such a marvelous book. And you gave me the perfect segue to television by talking about what is the plan for The Spy Coast to be a series. Can you envision that? What's happening with that? If you can
Well,
tell.
it has been optioned. They have hired the showrunners who are writing the pilot script, and that's all I know. Once it goes into Hollywood, it kind of goes into a black box, and you don't find out until it opens up at the end. But I have been told that we'll probably have really solid details later on in the fall this year. As for I've heard talent being bandied about, names. I can't talk about them, but I'm really excited because it's one of these shows where we're going to see a wide variety of ages on
Mhm.
television, from Joe, who's young, to some of these Martini Club people who are in their late 70s. It'll be fun to watch that cross-generational conflict and camaraderie.
And the multiple settings are so perfect for it. It is absolutely cinematic from moment one. Even, and then I'll take some questions after this question. Oh, I forgot to ask you about, your Maine, your small town Maine, of,
Mhm.
how you find out what's happening in the town. And you use that small town so wonderfully, even as a character in this novel. Talk a little bit about the specialness of small town Maine.
Oh, well, yeah, as I said, I've been here for 33 years, so there must be something special about this place. Um, you know, the question that comes up is, why do so many spies move to Maine? What is it about this place that's so magical that connects them here? And it's not just the beauty of the place. It is that I think people here are very respectful of your privacy. They don't get into your business, and maybe that's one of the reasons spies feel comfortable here. It's also that they may have come here because they were exposed to it through previous CIA activity in Maine, and
Mhm.
this would be a place for safe houses. But what I love about this town is that, yeah, people do know, we do know what's going on, but we don't pry. And honestly, when I think about how do I know what's going on in town, I actually pick up the phone and call my son because he's the one who seems to know all the gossip. I don't.
It's a wonderful setting, and I can't wait to see this on television. But before that, you all, please look at The Spy Coast. It's the first in a series. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're working on the next one?
I am working on the next one. It is called The Summer Guests, and it's the same cast, but this story is going to be closer to home. It's going to be focused on that little town in Maine.
I love that. I came back I was in the UK a couple of months ago in a town called Aldborough on the coast of the UK, on the east coast of England. And someone told me that Aldborough in England is where all the retired MI5 and 6 spies go to retire. And someone said, oh, someone should write a book about that. And I said, she already has. The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen. You should look at that. The retired head of MI6 was there, lived there. And I kept saying, point him out to me, point him, or maybe it's a woman. Nobody would do it. Nobody would tell me who it was. So I know you all.
Yeah, they're respectful of privacy too, I guess.
Exactly. If I had just stayed longer, I could have ferreted it out. I'm sure. Investigative reporter me. Anyway, all of you, so happy to have you here today. Let's have some questions for the fabulous Tess Gerritsen. Kathy Hamdy Swing, hey Kathy, says, I'm curious about why a chicken farmer. Is there more to the hen pecking and egg laying for the protagonist?
No, I just chose chicken farming because that's my experience with chickens, and also because it just feels like a relaxing and fun way to go into retirement, and you get to eat it.
And you do use the chickens and taking care of the chickens as a way for her to connect with other people. You can sometimes it's easier to talk about chickens than other things.
It's therapy for her, and also it's a bond between her and her little teenage next door neighbor who also raises animals, and a bond that becomes closer during the course of this book because that little girl wants a mother so badly, and Maggie doesn't have any children, so that's another bond.
There you have another relationship in the book brought together by the chickens. Who else has a question? A chicken isn't just a chicken. I was wondering how your retired CIA agent neighbors, says Kathy, felt about the Spy Coast. Did you reach out to any of them when you were researching the book?
I have had people sidle up to me and tell me, by the way, did you know? And so I get a lot of, on the side comments and questions. And I have talked to a number of CIA offspring, because a lot of these people that retired here are getting older now. So I'm really more in touch with their children or their grandchildren. And, I think they find it really funny that this story is set in the coast of Maine. I saw one letter to the editor in response to the book review in my local paper. And she made a funny comment. She said, I was talking to a CIA person and they said, oh yeah, it's well known, but here's what's not well known is that the CIA agents who are like the bottom of the barrel, the worst of the crop, they retired to Bethesda. The ones that were sort of like middling spies, they retired to Florida, but the cream of the crop came to Maine. So we have the smartest ones up here.
That's fantastic. And that hierarchy is so fabulous. That's just something that you would never know until you wrote this book. That's great. Yep. We have time for one more question. Do we have one more? I see so many questions in the comments. Randy. Hey, Randy. Do you keep a dream journal?
I don't. I probably should, because you wake up, you think that's a great idea. And then a day after you've forgotten what it was. But if it's a really, I guess, traumatizing dream, you don't forget that. And, right. And that will stick with you. Yeah.
And sometimes during the day, you forget the dream. And then sometimes during the day, you'll see a thing and you think, oh, I dreamed about having a turtle. I forgot about that. So your brain is storing things away.
Yeah.
Your brain is storing things away. I know we have many more questions. Do we want to have time for one more? Yay. Love this. Sharon says, hey, Sharon, do you picture certain actors or actresses while you write? What the characters look like?
I don't. I think the characters for me are still very shady. I mean, I just have like a blurry idea of what they look like. It's better because I keep an open mind when they come to me with cast ideas. So I don't.
So we're all thinking Helen Mirren and Blythe Danner and Susan Sarandon and
right.
The woman who's married to Warren Beatty, her name, she's wonderful, and her name is
Annette Bening. She was one I was thinking of. But other names that have come up are Jodie Foster, for instance. She's actually the right age right now. She's 60. So
we should call her. I'm sure she's watching. Absolutely. I'm sure she's watching. That sounds great. I sort of pictured you, I have to say, Tess, as Maggie Bird. I don't know why, but that works for me as well. Yeah. She is amazing. She's brilliant. She's wonderful. She's absolutely fantastic with a romantic and wonderful past and a gorgeous mind. So that is Tess Gerritsen, and this is The Spy Coast. So let's spin the wheel of fun and see who wins a copy of this novel. Margaret will push the button and we'll see who wins. I love this. I always think there should be music for this. I really do. It doesn't seem to work. Look at all the people who are here. That's great. And the winner is Patricia Butler Stefan. I hope I said that correctly, or Stefan. Patricia Butler Stefan, you win. You will be getting some information to email to email our executive producer, to email Tess's publisher, to send you the book. And that is how this is going to work. But Patricia, you win The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen. Let me just ask you to stand by for 1 second, Tess, while I remind everyone that next week at 4 p.m., we'll be talking to Ashley Elston about First Lie Wins. I'm about halfway through this, and it is twisty. And that today we have talked to Tess Gerritsen about The Spy Coast. I can tell you, if any of you live in New England, I will tell you that Tess is going to be interviewing me, which is quite amazing and quite astonishing, on February the 2nd in person at Brookline Booksmith at 7 p.m. for the launch of One Wrong Word. And I know you can't see my feet, but they are not touching the ground. I am so happy about that. So check my website and Tess's too, to find out how to join us in person at Brookline Booksmith, February the 2nd. Until next Tuesday, I'll still hold this up again, The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen. Until next Tuesday when we talk to Ashley Elston. Tess, thank you. Safe travels.
Thank you. And I'll see you February 2nd.
That is so great. I'm completely excited about it. Love to everyone and love to you all. Thank you so much for coming today. And remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.